السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ثم ما بعد. Brothers and sisters in Islam, today we conclude the story of Saeed Ibn Aamir Al-Jumahi, one of those companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose name isn't very well known, whose name isn't very famous, but who nonetheless has a story that bears repeating and that bears learning from. So last time we discussed how Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, promoted Sa'id radiallahu anhu to the position of governor of Homs, a city in modern day Syria. So after he was promoted to the position of governor, Sa'id radiallahu anhu, he became a source of controversy amongst the inhabitants of the city. They had some complaints about him. And when Umar radiallahu anhu came for a visit to check up on Sa'id radiallahu anhu and check up on the city in general, he heard of these complaints. Now Umar radiallahu anhu, as we discussed, to was very keen on ensuring the quality of his governors. He wanted to make sure that he had selected the best people and that his cities were being run well. And so he sort of did an impromptu survey of the city. He asked the residents what they thought of their governor, of their emir, and that was when he was informed of four complaints that they had about him. Now, what were these four complaints? The first was that Sa'id Rajalan didn't come out of his house until fairly late in the day. So every day, no one would see him until fairly late in the day. The second complaint was that he didn't come out at night, period. That if anyone wanted to visit him at night with any concerns or any issues or any issues, they would not be received. He did not take any audiences uh, at night, period. He did not see anyone and no one saw him. So that was the second complaint. The third complaint was that there was a day or 2 days every single month where no one would see him. He would just disappear for the entire day. No one would see or hear from him on this day. And the fourth complaint was that sometimes he would faint during meetings or just in general. He would just randomly faint. He would black out. And this became a source of frustration for some of the residents in the city. So, what are the four complaints? One, that he comes out late during the day. Two, that he doesn't receive anyone at night. Three, that there is a day every month where he completely disappears. And four, that he sometimes faints at random. So Umar ibn Khattab, he listened very carefully to these four complaints. And then he said, I'll summon him so that you two can meet and discuss this, so he can address your concerns. And I pray to God that my impression of him is not damaged, because I used to have great confidence in him. So Sa'id was brought out. He was summoned to the people. And Umar, he put forth these four complaints. And he asked Sa'id to explain himself, to give an explanation as to why he was doing these four things. Excuse me. Now, Sa'id he was silent for a moment. And then he said, by God, I did not want to talk about this. I didn't want to disclose this, but it seems that I have no choice. The truth is, I come out pretty late during the day because my family, we don't have any servants or anyone to help us out. So I wake up early every day to prepare the dough and then to bake the bread. So I only go out to the people after I have baked the bread for my family. So after he's given his family a morning meal, only then does he go out to greet the people. Only then does he attend to his administrative duties. So that was the first explanation. And Umar, when he heard this, his face very visibly brightened, because this explanation actually cast a flattering light on the character of Sa'id radiallahu anhu. This explanation for why he came out of his home late, this actually elevated his character. It didn't lower it, it elevated it. It actually improved him in the eyes of Umar radiallahu anhu, because it was a noble thing. There was a noble reason to why he was coming out with the other, the remaining three complaints. And again, Sa'id radiallahu anhu was hesitant. He didn't want to talk about these things. He wasn't trying to brag here. He wasn't trying to boast of how he was so pious and religious. These were private matters, and very reluctantly being he was only very reluctantly disclosing what he had been doing because he was basically being forced into it. His people wanted explanations, they wanted to hold him accountable, and so he had no choice but to reveal the things that he up until now he had been doing in private that he had kept to himself. So he addressed the second complaint and he said, "The truth is, I have left the day to the people and reserved the night for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." By which he meant that he spends the night in prayer, in qiyam. He doesn't want to disturb his nightly prayer, his nightly worship with political affairs, with administrative concerns, which is why he closed his doors firmly at night, because this was the time that he dedicated to Allah. He dedicated the entire day. From the moment he left his home to the moment to the moment he returned to it, he dedicated that to running the city, to attending to the affairs of the people. But nighttime, this he wanted to keep exclusively reserved for worship, for cultivating his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, I leave the day for the people and I reserve the night for God, for Allah. Then he was asked about the third complaint, which is that there is a day where he doesn't come out to see anyone. And he said, I didn't want to talk about this either, but the truth is, I only really have one pair of clothing. And so on that day, I wash it and then I hang it out to dry. Hence why I don't come out during that day. Because that's the day that he washes the only pair of clothing that he has. Because remember, as we discussed last time, Sa'id when he was given 1,000 dinars by Umar, instead of giving it to himself, he redistributed the wealth to the poor in the city. And thus he himself became one of the poorest men in the city, despite being its ruler, despite being its governor. So that was the third explanation. And finally, the fourth, that sometimes he blacks out randomly. And there's one Sa'id Rajulan, he revealed that he said, when I was younger and had not yet entered Islam, I witnessed the execution of a believer, of a companion of the Prophet. And as we might recall, we actually discussed this during the first. We discussed this a few sessions back when we began talking about Sa'id radiallahu anh. When he was young, he witnessed the execution of Khubayb radiallahu anh, who had been hung on a wooden cross, then slowly dismembered by the Quraysh, who taunted him all throughout. And so Sa'id radiallahu anh, he said, I saw this execution with my own eyes, and I saw the Quraysh taunting him, and I saw them asking him if he would rather Muhammad, the Prophet, be in his place. And I saw him saying that he would not be with his family if he knew that it caused even a thorn to prick the side of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So if being with his family, being safe meant even that tiny modicum of pain would come to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he did not want it. And of course, eventually he was cut into so many different pieces and he died. And it was a brutal, grisly death. And Sa'id radiallahu anh, even now, this late in life, even after all he had done, was still haunted by that scene. He said, I think about the fact that I was there and I didn't raise my arm to help. I didn't even try to intervene. And a visceral fear seizes me. I fear that I'll be punished for my inaction on that day. So here we see again just what a transformative experience this was for Sa'id radiallahu anh, witnessing this execution. It eventually drove him to Islam, and even after he became a Muslim, it continued to haunt his thoughts, it continued to haunt his dreams. It haunted him so viscerally that he would faint from it. And this was the explanation for why he would sometimes black out. He said, when I remember that scene and remember what I did, or rather what I didn't do, the fear that strikes me is so powerful, I faint. He just black out. So this was a situation. This is how deeply he was affected by what he saw that day and how moved he remained by it even after all these years. Clearly, it still drove him to be the best Muslim that he could be, because for him, he was still trying to compensate, still trying to redeem himself for what he didn't do on that day. And so when Umar, when he heard all of this, he was filled with joy. And he hugged Sa'id and he said, "By God, I knew Allah would not let you disappoint me. I knew that Allah would not let you disappoint me." Because again, Umar, he held Sa'id in such high esteem, in such high regard. And this only confirmed that high opinion of Sa'id. So Umar was overjoyed by the confirmation of the integrity and quality and piety of his character. And so the complaints all had not just reasonable explanations, but noble explanations that revealed the high character of Sa'id. And so, of course, he remained governor. And later, Umar, after, of course, after hearing what happened, we might presume, he sent, because of what happened, we might presume, he sent uh, another bag of dinars to Sa'id, and we can guess what Sa'id did. Yep, he redistributed the wealth once again. Truly truly he was like the Ansar as they are described in the Quran. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. And they prefer others over themselves even if they are in need. Even if they are in need. He needed that wealth, but every time he had it, he gave it away. This is a pure expression of ithar, of preferring others over yourself, even if you have a right to something. It's not that others need it more than you, so you're giving it to them. No, you need it too. You are just as entitled to it as they are. You have an equal right to it as they do, and yet you give it away anyways. That is ithar, and it is one of the hardest things to do. It is one of the hardest, most painful things to do. Ithar does not come easy to the human being, and so those of us who have actually achieved this capacity for ithar, who have perfected this capacity and who have made it an integral part of our character, those of us today are very rare indeed. And that was what Sa'id was. He was truly a man who lived his life in accordance with ithar, no matter where he was or what position he was in. Even when he was the governor, even when he was the emir of the city, he continued to practice ithar. And there's a very, very powerful example in that for each and every single one of us. And so that concludes the story of Saeed Ibn Aamir Al-Jumahi. Inshallah, next time we'll begin the story of a new companion. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.